We're live.
Yeah, nice background.
Good evening and welcome to the Monomoy Regional School District School Committee meeting Thursday, May 28th, 2020 at 6:30. Being held remotely. The meeting is fully remotely in accordance with Governor of Massachusetts, March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A Section 20. You can find the Zoom meeting on our website and the link there and the meeting ID and password as well. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. and the first item on the agenda would be the approval of the minutes from May 14th, 2020.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes for May 14th, 2020.
I would second that.
Okay, and I'm going to do a roll call. Please turn your mics on. Terri?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Nancy?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
And Joe?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Motion carries. At this time is the opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience today who would like to speak, I just ask that you limit it to 5 minutes. Okay, I'm just making sure there's not a second page of people, but I don't think there is. Okay. Seeing none, moving on to reports and discussion. The FY19 audit and financial overview of the district with Emily Pina joining us tonight. Hi,
Hey,
Emily.
everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be able to see everybody. I wish it was in person, but glad to be able to be here and do this.
Great.
I want to start out with thanking the district. We always enjoy working with the district. It's been a wonderful experience again this year. Katie, and we had newer members this year working in the accounting office. It was a smooth process. We appreciate everything that you guys do to prepare for us coming in and appreciate all the assistance that we need while we're there gathering different documents and answering questions and generally being a pest. So we appreciate that. Thank you so much. So just to tell you a little bit about what we do. So we're there to do a financial audit for the school district of the financial statements. So that requires us to examine documentation for the amounts that are reported in the ledger for the district each year. So that includes all of the cash balances, loan balances. And then in addition to that, we do a lot of analytical reviews. So we look at revenues and expenses, compare them from the prior years, also factor in any expectations that we have, knowing what was supposed to happen during the district. We read through all of your meeting minutes to understand what's happening and what you guys are talking about and the things that are rising to the level of importance that you guys need to discuss those things. So we're factoring those things in as we come up with our expectations and use those to review the analytical review of the revenues, expenses, and then all of the balance sheet items as well. And then in addition to that, we do test of transactions. So we actually dig into, pick a sample of receipts and a sample of cash disbursements and a sample of payroll transactions. And then we walk through those, all of the steps that took place, all the approvals, the supporting documentation that's on file, make sure there is a file, that there are things there for us to look at. And we review those and compare them to checks and balances that the district has in place to make sure that those things actually happened. So throughout that process, we're looking at the internal control system that the district has in place, because that's where we make sure that all of your assets are safeguarded and that we're not going to be running into any issues, putting your name in the paper, all of those types of things. That's where we want to make sure that you have a strong internal control system to allow for these financial statements to truly reflect what's happening in the district and where you stand. So as a result of all the work that we did, we had 3 separate reports that we issue. It's the same reports that we issue annually. The first is on the financial statements. The financial statements are yours. They start with the general ledger and all of the bookkeeping and accounting records that are kept in the district. And from there, we start with those and we do our work to determine whether or not the financial statements that have been housed and kept in the district fairly state where the district was at the end of the year and that the revenues and expenses fairly state as well. And then from there, we have to make a lot of adjustments to those to get from the fund basis financial statements that you're used to seeing in-house to the entity-wide financial statements that are on a full accrual basis that capture things like your capital assets and long-term debt that aren't generally on the books of the district. Aren't required to be. So once we went through all of our audit work, analytical, and the supporting documentation, we were able to get to a place where we were comfortable saying that we could issue an unmodified opinion on those financial statements. So that's the best opinion you can get, and it's stating that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects. So that's what you received for fiscal 19. Has been the case for as long as I've been working with you. You have a great financial team in place. The next report that we issue is on internal control over your financial reporting. So this is, we did all of our testing, so we want to make sure that the internal control is in a good place. So we're looking for significant deficiencies. So those would be deficiencies that would cause an error to happen in the financial accounting world that wasn't detected, corrected, and wasn't prevented, detected, and corrected by management throughout their regular course of work. So that's a significant deficiency. The next level of that is a material weakness. So that's a deficiency in the same manner, but it would rise to the level that it would cause a material misstatement within your financial statements, which is significant. For you for fiscal 19, materiality was set at $240,000. So it would have to be a pretty significant mistake to reach that level, but that's not anything that we saw. So based on the work, we were able to say that we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that rose to the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness that we'd have to report to you. So again, a clean report there, exactly what you'd want to get. The last report that we issue is on the single audit. So when a district expends over $750,000 of federal grant proceeds within a year, you have to do a single audit, which means we have to look at all of the federal grants you had, go through a checklist, and we determine which one was your major program for the year. And then from there, we take that major program and we look at what the federal government has put out as compliance requirements for that particular grant. And then we go through each of those compliance requirements and document and determine how the district met those compliance requirements. For fiscal 19, that major program was the SPED grant cluster. So we went through and reviewed all of those compliance requirements, and we found that the district was in compliance with all the requirements of that grant. So again, a clean opinion, exactly what you want there. So those are the major reports and results of what we did when we were there. Just some highlights from the financial statements. They're hefty. I don't know how much detail you've looked through them, but questions that we generally get at every exit meeting relates to the deficit balances that exist on the full accrual basis financial statements. So for the district for this year, it was a deficit of $25 million, which doesn't sound good, but it's not uncommon. As a result of government accounting standards, we now have to report your OPEB liability and your pension liability in a full basis on your financial statements at the end of the year. It's an unfunded liability. You don't have the assets to offset that. And as a result of that, that's causing the negative net position that we see at the end of the year. So again, it's not something that's uncommon. All of the districts around you, all the towns around you are facing the same thing. When this initially rolled out, it was a concern that, is this going to be an issue for bond ratings and things like that? But it's not anything that's particular to you. It's across the board. So it's factored in when they look at those types of things. On the governmental fund basis, an area to look at there, to look at how the district's doing as far as liquidity goes. It's good to take the unassigned fund balance as well as the total fund balance for the general fund and compare those to the revenues and expenses for the general fund on an annual basis. The benchmark and goal there is to be about 5%. And for fiscal 19, you were 5% compared to the unassigned fund balance and 6% when we looked at the total fund balance. So exactly where you want to be in that position. I've worked with the district for many years. We've had different players in there, but the systems and the controls that you have in place are sound, which allows for smooth transitions, that you have people come in and out, and good communication within the office. It's a great place to work. Everybody is willing to work together in a collaborative manner, which is very, very important. So overall, we don't have any concerns. This is a very clean report for us. Is there anything specific that I could answer for anybody?
Thank you so much, Emily. So at this point, I will open it for discussion or questions. It looks like Katie, your hand, and then after that, Joe, I think.
Emily, thank you. And sometimes the audit is a little daunting for everybody. And I think it's important for everybody to know that, all of our audits are on the website, and we send them to the 2 towns as well. So if anyone has any questions, they're all there. In the past, we've had exit interviews in the office and with the, maybe the chair and the co-chair. So this was an opportunity I felt that was important, since I'll be retiring at the end of June with a new business manager, Michael, coming in on July 1st. I've been the business manager for the whole time that we've been Monomoy. I thought it was important for put a little bit of closure to like my reign there. And so I think that what Emily is communicating is really good news all around. And we've worked hard, and I appreciate them. That it's not an easy task. And what I always say to my staff is, my goal, as much as I enjoy having Emily in the conference room down below downstairs, is that we don't see the auditors. That everything we give them is they have all the information in front of them, so they can follow the audit trail. They can see the school committee minutes, and then see the votes, and then see the budget or whatever in the process through. That's not to say that we don't see them coming and grabbing our payroll reports, et cetera, and the backup documentation. But to reiterate, I just thought it was important to just kind of have this exit interview with everybody in light of my retirement. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And Joe, did you have your hand up?
No, I was just trying to signal that Katie was trying to get your attention. I was
Great.
hoping you wouldn't miss it, but you caught it.
Thank you. And Terry, please.
A question to Katie, and I'm sure you have the answer. Would Emily be meeting Michael prior to July 1? I know Michael's been public school up in Cohasset, so he must deal with the same process.
So, just a kind of excuse me, bittersweet, interesting turn of events. COVID-19 has resulted in Emily's audit firm of not being able to do some of the municipal or all of the municipal audits. So what we're doing now is we are soliciting quotes. So we will have a new audit company, which also adds to the importance of this meeting. However, the relationship that we have with Scapini and Pina, which is the company that Emily is a partner at, Emily has already said that if Michael has any questions, or we can do some Zoom meetings between now and June 30th, just so that they can talk about things, and and Emily can highlight things that are good or something that could be better. So even though that firm will not be conducting the audit of 2020, there'll be a nice transition going into the change in management.
Great, thanks, Kate.
Absolutely. I'm happy to help in any way from now until July 1st, when your new auditor comes, whenever you need me. I've worked with the district also since inception, with a few year gap in there, but I've been there for a long time. So I have a lot of knowledge as far as the audit goes and the financials and the background there. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. Are there any other questions for Emily tonight? Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for all your work. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a nice night, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.
All right, moving on. Item 2 will be the superintendent evaluation process and questions. I'll probably have someone from the evaluation committee speak, but prior to that, I just wanted to let you know there's been a change. The only change is that I've asked Joanne to complete the summation of the evaluation and present that going forward, but I don't want to change anything else right now as far as where to send it. So continue to do exactly as was instructed originally. Please email me the evaluations, and then I will go ahead and pass them on to Joanne so that she can review and create the summation and do the presentation for the evaluation. And at that, I was going to see who would like to, as if there's anything other announcements regarding the evaluation process, and kind of handle any questions anyone might have from that committee. Nancy, Ms. Scott?
I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to do a quick review one more time. I mean, we're at the point now where you guys all received an email with the summative evaluation packet. The only thing you're responsible to submit to Jackie is the first 2 pages. If you want to submit more and want to send in more backup documentation, you can, but the only thing that Joanne is going to look at to do the summative is those first 2 pages of the evaluation.
Great, and I would follow up by, if you're not able to email them, you certainly can somehow get them to Leah and Leah can get them to me, that's certainly fine too. And Terri, like I know Terri needed another copy. If you need a hard copy of something, please let one of us know so that we can get that to you and get them in by June 1st, I believe is the date. All right, great. With that, we will move swiftly along to item 3, the FY21 Regional School District Interim or 1/12 budget. Dr. Carpenter?
So we met with the finance subcommittee, and to follow up on last our conversation at the last school committee meeting too, we have to by June 1st submit to the Department of Ed and the Commissioner a 1/12 budget, and we know now that with although Chatham is having a June 22nd town meeting on Veterans Field, Harwich has pushed their town meeting back until late September. So in order for us to have cash flow to fund the district, there needs to be an amount that is set that the district will get monthly until each town has an opportunity to vote budgets to support the schools. So schools find themselves in this situation of having to do 1/12 budgets in that scenario where you don't have an agreement on a budget between your towns, or in the odd situation that we find ourselves in now with COVID-19 derailing town meetings in a lot of communities. There's the need to go submit to DESE to establish this 1/12 budget, which essentially is a budget that's 1/12 of the operating budget of the current fiscal year, with little twists in that the Chapter 70 money that's part of that 1/12 budget is based on the latest numbers that were published. So it's the Chapter 70 money that is part of the governor's budget this year, which we also discussed with the finance subcommittee, we know is already flawed. So there's some flaws behind this 1/12 budget because it is based on pre-COVID-19 numbers somewhat, even at the state level. So there will be a 1/12 budget would get set by the state. We discussed as a subcommittee sort of a strategy, and one of the things that that we had talked about is the want to at least leave some flexibility in how much excess and deficiency we could use to offset FY21. And the interesting challenge you have is, without knowing what a hard number is from Harwich that we need to shoot for, we can't really hone in there. We don't really know what true Chapter 70 money is going to look like from the state. And when we submit a 1/12 budget, if we whatever we submit for our excess and deficiency in that 1/12 budget becomes the maximum amount of excess and deficiency that we can use next year. We can always opt to use less, but we can't go back after the fact and elect to use more. So the conversation was, how do we go take the budget proposals that we have had and try to modify it in a way that makes sense? So, so what we as administration subcommittee decided would be most appropriate is deduct from the overall budget that we had been pushing forward with both towns and discussing with both towns the cost of the ELA curriculum. Because while we all want to see that ELA curriculum happen, this is just not the right fiscal year to have that happen in, given the challenges. So the cost of the ELA curriculum, as it was hitting the operating budget, is deducted off of the proposal. So there's a reduction of $285,191. And we also back out the amount of money that we were using to support the ELA budget from excess and deficiency. So we're sort of shifting both of those lines. We had spoken at our last meeting about a series of other reductions that would be reductions in staffing that would help us get down to a 1/12 budget. At the moment, what we have done is they're not coming out of the budget. But we're going to need to reduce additional costs because because in order to maximize how much excess and deficiency we are saying that we could use, it ends up being an amount in our proposal that isn't fiscally sustainable year after year. So we have suggested that excess and deficiency amount should be $1,666,141. In reality, as we quote unquote land the plane in a 1/12 budget, we're going to have to reduce staff like we discussed, which will have us use less excess and deficiency and hopefully come in at an amount that is viable for FY22 and beyond. But at the same time, it does leave us some flexibility once we get the number from Harwich to decide, do we need to use additional excess and deficiency? We do have the capacity to do that, but we still have so many unknowns. So this is just trying to provide us the most flexibility when we have to go and make budget decisions by June 1, when we don't have solid numbers from the state nor solid numbers from both of our towns. So I think that sort of sums up the conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Katie.
And I just wanted to add, in terms of the process with the 1/12 budget, as we mentioned, as Dr. Carpenter mentioned, that has to be submitted to the Department of Ed on Monday, June 1st. However, on Tuesday afternoon, this past Tuesday, we were invited, all of the regional schools, to attend a meeting of this nature with the Department of Ed to discuss the 1/12 budget. So it'll be interesting to see if things change, if things are delayed. So I don't know if it's just clarifying some of the process, but tomorrow at noon, we will be meeting with them for clarification or further information about the next part of the process. So once I have more information, I'll pass it along.
Great, thank you, Katie. Nancy.
As I was looking over the material that was sent out earlier, I know that when we vote a budget, once we vote the budget, we can't raise the budget. It can only be reduced. And because this has never come up before, can an assessment be raised after it's voted?
I don't believe so.
So then I think we might have a flaw in our thought process. Because if that means regardless of what we do with our excess and deficiency, we're going to reduce the assessments to the two towns by as much as the excess and deficiency that we use.
At this point, yes, that is true.
So I'm not.
I think the other wild card, while it's unknown, we know it's going to be tracking in a not so beneficial direction.
I completely get that.
We know that that on Monday, when we have to submit this to DESE, the Harwich Selectmen will also be having a public conversation about what the revenue shortfall in Harwich is looking like. So
Well, they
So-
did mention it last night. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've heard that.
So this will be, so the budget, I think the final budget that we're going to have to narrow in on is going to be less. And, but so we're not going to, there's not a conceivable way if the budget's going to be less that we're going to be increasing assessments to either town.
Nancy, what is the, what did Harvard say is the shortfall?
Carol mentioned last night that she anticipates a 4.1 million shortfall in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Katie, sorry.
So
Katie.
Nancy, to your point, that's exactly the clarification I need to get from the DESE tomorrow in terms of, so what's interesting is even though everybody is challenged at this budget time because of COVID-19, certain parts of the state, revenues particularly, are more challenged than others. And our area being one because of the dependency on tourism, etc. So I'm going to specifically say, if we are looking at that we want to use up to a certain amount, how does that kind of play out with the assessment? Are we locked into the assessment or but if I'm reading the tea leaves, I have a feeling that we're going to have several more budget discussions. And at this point, I think that this is like a best case scenario budget that we're looking at right now. However, I don't know how that works in terms of the assessment coming down. I mean, the use of E&D coming down. I know that when I spoke with them before, the DESE, we can vote an amount to use of E&D, but we can choose later on to expend less than what we had originally approved to utilize. But I don't know how that ends up translating with the assessments. If, I guess maybe if the chapter 70 comes in higher or whatever, but I will get more clarification tomorrow because this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, it's definitely uncharted territory. And in my head, when we had this conversation yesterday with using more E&D, I guess in the back of my head, I have the positive outlook that we wouldn't have to actually reduce our budget by an additional 900, 1.2, whatever million, and not use all the E&D. But I guess my hesitation now, and it didn't occur to me until I was just rereading it and looking at the numbers, that if we reduce the overall assessment and therefore each individual town's assessment and something positive happens somewhere down the line, that we're locked into not having the assessments any higher than what we voted. So I don't know.
Sharon?
Nancy, my question for you is about what Carol said. Did she say that was without using their free cash, or was that including free cash? Did she mention that?
No, it was purely a question as to what she anticipated. These are my notes that I took when I watched the replay. She anticipated a 4.1 million shortfall in revenue for FY21.
And they think that there's going to be a surplus in 20.
Yeah,
So,
she did say a modest surplus in 20.
So how much of that surplus might be able to help offset 21 is still, I think, still going to play out. Nancy, I think to answer your question, I think we also can keep in mind that Chatham is voting a budget for the schools that is the FY21 budget as we initially put it forth. Should something more positive happen in Harwich where they can afford something above what is the 1/12th, all it needs to be passed is at town meeting. They would just need to pass something, and whichever is the lower of those two for the towns becomes the new budget. So the 1/12th budget is only in play until both towns have passed a budget. And the way the budget works for the regional school district is whichever town has passed the lowest increase for, we end up having to go with the lower of the two. So and then the other town goes with that lower value.
Thank you, Scott. I see Miss Scott is still thinking. I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions at this time. Sharon and then Tina.
So I thought I had this all straight until Nancy mentioned that $4 million. And so my question, I guess, is for you, Scott, or Katie. Well, first of all, I'm not sure exactly how much of our budget is, what proportion of the town's budget is the school's budget. And 80%?
38.
38%, okay. I
Ish.
wasn't sure about those fingers, 38%, okay. So are we sure that what we're doing with our E&D is not going to make us have to cut more than we are thinking of in people?
I just want to be clear. There's a high likelihood that we will have to do further reductions to get to 38% of $4.1 million. So, when we walked the school committee through the exercise 2 weeks ago to get to, or what we were doing is just trying to say how much would we have to reduce staffing, and also we had the ELA curriculum and some capital things in there. So we reduced just shy of $1 million in that exercise. Our share, if we were 38% of $4.1 million, our share's over $2 million, because you have to keep in mind that you'd have to take 38% of the $4.1 million, and then remember that Chatham is roughly 25% of that. So you'd have to take that that number, divide by roughly 75%, and you end up getting a number that's that's just north of $2 million would be our share. So so we're, the cuts that we had talked about gets us halfway there. We can use a little bit more excess and deficiency, but if we were to go throw the amount of excess and deficiency we were initially going to support FY21 with, and dump all of our excess and deficiency, we would forego staff cuts in FY21, but you'd have this big layoff in FY22 because suddenly you have no reserves left, and you have this big fiscal hole that you're having to climb out of in FY22. So what you want to do is find some happy medium in between there. So so this is the motions that we've suggested and sent to the committee is a way to buy us some time until we get some clarity from Chatham or clarity from Harwich, and then I think we need to work with both towns on coming up with an approach towards FY21 for the schools so that we can maintain quality services. I think that first tier of cuts that we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago at our school committee meeting can bridge us and I think not decimate the school district. But when you start to go and say, okay, what would you have to do if you had to cut another $1 million out of a school district budget that's a relatively small school district? It's not just, we start to not just lose teachers, we start to lose programs. And that's that's some place I think both towns need to understand, is that, that suddenly, and this is, I think I sent to the school committee, something I had sent to email to Sarah Peak yesterday. A concern I have is that in towns like ours that are so dependent on a tourist economy, and how this is potentially going to play out fiscally for us, is that you have to be concerned about what will the schools look like if there is this big fiscal hole. You have far less staff, bigger class sizes, less options and programs for kids, and that's not something we want to see. But but we also know that this is a big fiscal challenge for us locally and the state and the nation.
Tina, did you have a question? I feel like you did, and then.
Yeah, I think I've gotten a lot of it answered with everybody else's questions, but just for clarity, because I asked this yesterday, because we're now in a public meeting, just for anybody that is thinking maybe like I was thinking yesterday, and you kind of already explained this a little bit, Scott. So with Chatham having their town meeting, I believe on June 22nd. So what they're voting on is what we've already been talking about. Is that correct? So
right. So they as a town can support the FY21 budget as we discussed and presented using pre-COVID-19 numbers.
okay.
But keep in mind, for the town of Chatham, the assessment that we were going to be giving the town was a negative assessment to begin with. So Chatham was in a good place budgetarily with the schools. And Harwich had a positive, an assessment that was slightly positive. It was, so it was an assessment that was about a 2% assessment pre-COVID-19. And what we understand from Harwich, with a $4.1 million revenue shortfall in the town, is that they can't support a budget that's 2% higher than the present year when revenues are less than what they had anticipated. So, so this 1/12 budget is bringing us from a 2% increase for Harwich temporarily, and I want to emphasize temporarily, down to a 0% increase for an assessment for Harwich. But even that, we all have to just go into this eyes wide open. I think the town is clearly telling us that a 1/12 budget isn't something that they're going to be able to sustain throughout FY21.
Right. So for Chatham, again, on June 22nd, so assuming they're voting on that budget, the budget, that we had talked about pre-COVID, I guess. So they're paying in July, August, and September their portion of that. Is that right?
No, they would.
Oh,
they would.
okay.
So when the commissioner sets a 1/12 budget, Chatham will pay the assessment, that monthly assessment that's the 1/12 budget assessment.
Okay.
So we're going to be receiving from Chatham less funds than what they're going to approve at their town meeting.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you very much.
Nancy?
I don't think I agree that Chatham's going to be voting on our original assessment if we're planning on revoting the budget now, because wouldn't this be no different than if we, in years past, pre any sort of natural pandemic, if we voted our budget in March like we normally would, And then we would have a conversation towards the end of April, and we found some changes and we reduced our budget. The towns on town meeting floor would be voting the budget that we modified. So why would Chatham be voting on a budget that we are intending to modify tonight if they're not voting until another month from now? They would be voting on the budget that we modified tonight, because we're not voting a 1/12 budget. We're voting a new FY21 budget.
So I actually, I would argue that what we're voting tonight is not a new FY21 budget, but it's a 1/12 budget. So when a regional, if a regional school district has two towns that are out of sync, and one town's going to have a town meeting after June 30th, both the towns could vote budgets that are higher than a 1/12 budget. So you could end up higher than a 1/12 budget, but until you've had both those votes, a 1/12 budget would be in place. And so Chatham, when they went to the printers for their warrant, went to the printers to have it be the budget as we presented it. I think the school committee can elect to go and say, well, change what the vote is, and have it be a 1/12 is that what the town of Chatham would vote on. And of course, the interesting thing here is we're not anticipating that Harwich is going to say, oh, we can support something above a 1/12. We're anticipating that at the end of the day, this is probably going to be significantly less than a 1/12 budget.
Scott?
I don't follow completely. I mean, this isn't a 1/12 budget because the total budget for FY21, which I don't know if I can find quick enough to be able to pull out, but the $41 million
449, 432.
Well, that's what we're looking to possibly change it to.
Correct.
But that wouldn't be level funded from FY20. Our FY20 budget wasn't 41,700. So it wouldn't be a 1/12 of that amount. So in my mind, Chatham should be, if we move to update our total budget to 41,449, that's the amount that Chatham would be voting on June 22nd, because we've updated it before town meeting, and therefore we need to tell them that. So that's what they're going to vote. They're not voting the 1/12 budget. That's what we did and talked about, and that's what the state's going to say. What am I missing?
Sorry, I was looking at something. Terri. Terri, unmute.
How's that? Can
Good.
you hear me now?
Yep.
Real simple. Nancy, I kind of see your point as I do Scott's. However, putting that aside, if Chatham has already printed their warrant, what we discuss right now is really moot, because that whatever is in the warrant will be changed downward once we have more facts out of Harwich. So I don't know if we can continue this evening to pass just exactly what the number should be in Chatham, whether it's 1/12 or not, because I see that changing twice more once we have some hard numbers beyond this 4.1, and how Harwich Municipal plans to kind of cut that down. Thus, our share will be processed back into that number. So I don't know whether or not we're going to profit anymore tonight, Because I don't know if even if we contacted Chatham, how they're gonna change that number.
Scott?
So typically, I mean, in years past, we've changed the actual budget and the assessment on town meeting floor. It's always been lowered because that's only what you're allowed to do, but that's happened in years past.
I think what's fundamentally different this year is in past years, we've had an agreement between both towns what that budget would be.
Right.
When you submit a 1/12 budget, you don't have an agreement on what that budget should be. And that's really where we are. You know, one town says I can support this number, and the next town is saying, we don't really know what number we can support yet. And, you know, and hence the state goes and sets a budget and says, this is what it's going to be until both towns can go and come to some resolution, you know, so that there is going to be cash flow coming into the district to go and support the district functioning. But but Terry's also right. I think whatever number Chatham passes at town meeting is going to get scaled back potentially temporarily by the state, because you know we're voting on what would our 1/12 budget number be. I suspect that what we vote is going to be different than what DESI sets, because I think DESI's trying to buy time for the state's numbers to come in. So they've already told us that Chapter 70 aid, we should anticipate it's going to be 10 to 20% less. So I suspect by the time they set that budget, they're probably going to reduce Chapter 70 in whatever that budget amount and the assessment amounts are appropriately. And you know, so we'll have this new number that comes out from the state that still sounds like it's going to be too high for Harwich if they're 4.1 low. So then there's going to be a new number that's going to come out. You know, so all of this will not likely be resolved until September 28th, I think is the town meeting for Harwich. So you know, so it's not going to be till September that it gets resolved. But at least for the months of July, August, and for September up until town meeting, there is an assessment that the towns will be providing this, or a payment that the schools will be providing the school district, you know, so that we have cash flow and can make, you know, pay the bills that need to get paid on our end.
Sharon?
So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm hearing, if I have it right, is that it might be better if Chatham goes with what's printed in there, because rather than changing it to a different number, if it was voted with the number that's printed there, they could be notified that everybody's going to have, at least Chatham's going to have a special town meeting. I'm not sure if Harwich will also, but at that time it would have to be done the correct number, right? Is that right?
Katie, I thought your hand was up. Yep.
So Sharon, you can always have a budget that's less. So even if Chatham voted an assessment, you know, the budget and an assessment of, let's just say $10 million, just for sake of conversation. And then after everything, you know, this is not going to be the last vote on the FY21 budget. This is going to be a time that this budget is going to get revoted probably 4 more times as things get a little more clear. But so we can always decrease, but you just can't increase. So I do sort of support the thinking that you have in terms of, you know, if Chatham is prepared to vote that higher amount, these are kind of like, the exercises are kind of muddied a little bit, because what we're looking at is what is it that we want to submit to the Department of Ed for June 1st, because our concern is if at that moment we say we're only going to use X for E&D, but then going forward we want to use more, are we not able to use more? So therefore we have to cut the budget as opposed to supporting, or then as it progresses, we can, if things start looking rosy, then we can use less. So by the time September comes, and a final vote has to come for the assessment in Howard for town meeting, these numbers might look completely different, positive or negative. But you can always go down, you just can't go up.
Thank you, Katie. Just scanning the room, looking to see if there are any other questions, discussion. Terry.
Thanks, Jackie. The thought strikes me, Katie, very clear. It does bring this to mind. At the Chatham town meeting, when the group raises their hands to vote on whatever that number is in the warrant, I'm wondering whether or not Scott or you or Representative Jackie or whoever, and Nancy, would somehow give a very brief tutorial to the present Chatham town members sitting there to say that this is a series based on COVID-19 that may continue on through the summer, and I won't continue on. But in an explanation where they would, the 400 people or whoever would be there to say, oh, I understand. And it may probably go down from what you just voted yes to. So they're not leaving thinking, and I know it is complex, and it's the first time for us through it all. So if you're a layman in Chatham sitting under in the field trying to hear it for the first time, a little challenge, but probably that might be a thought, or then again, it might just further confuse them.
My thought with that, Terry, would be that probably less is more, much to what you kind of said, that that if you go in with a budget and then you discuss that it possibly could be less and into the reasons of why, it just creates more concern why I'm voting this then, because there are so many people that don't understand the process that we've been going with. And as we sit here as a group, it's extremely complicated. So thinking of 400 people trying to figure out less or more, why am I voting the more when there may be a less, and trying to explain to them why.
Yeah, I agree.
My opinion would be maybe less is more, and just let it go, and knowing that we might be able to drop it down after. But that's me. Tina.
Yeah, actually, and I'm glad you said that, Jackie, because I would say the same thing. I mean, Chatham and Harwich, may have different thoughts about things, but if this were reversed and we were in front of Harwich, I could see a lot of people having hesitation about voting a budget that might be lower, but we don't know, and maybe twice. So yeah, I would agree with what Jackie said. I think less is more until we know more.
You convinced me.
I just don't want it getting voted down, and that would be my concern. If people think, well, what the heck's going on? I don't feel comfortable even voting on this. I don't want it to see it get voted down.
Ms. Scott?
I have one last question, and then I will be ready to make motions as needed. Scott and Katie, I guess my ultimate concern is, do you foresee us not reducing our assessment less than the 2.4% that we see on the sheet, total assessment? And then, so Harwich's would be a reduction of 4.155, no, 1.55. Chatham's would be a reduction in 4.87 for a total assessment reduction of 2.4. Do either one of you see any positive anywhere that we would possibly want to not reduce our assessment to the towns more than, less than?
Reduce it more than.
So basically have an assessment that's only reduced 2% instead of 2.4%. I'm not sure which way to say those numbers.
I think if this helps clarify things, I think if maybe in the motions, if you vote the budget for purposes of submitting a 1/12 budget, because this is what we're doing, is we're voting a temporary exercise to give to the state.
Yes, that does help.
Okay, so this, we are not locked into a 1/12 budget. we're locked into whatever both towns come to an agreement on after both town meetings.
Just to clarify, I'm okay with the budget, the FY21 budget number. I'm not okay with locking in those assessment numbers.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And
The
you know, so
assessment numbers
so
are
the
the
assessment-
1/12 numbers.
right. So the assessment,
That's what I was missing.
the assessment has the potential to go up if Harwich could afford it.
That's what I was missing. I knew I was missing something.
Yeah. But but realistically,
Realistically aside, I'd like to think a little positive, just a little.
Okay, Mary.
I'm trying to figure out how to work. So that was just like a light bulb for me too, because I've been listening and trying to wrap my brain around it. So what we need to do is we need to vote on the 1/12 budget tonight, but once the two towns have their town meeting, they're approving a full budget for fiscal year 21. Yes?
Yes.
Ah, that's a little bit clearer.
It's a wonderful thing. Okay, so I think everyone seems a little bit more comfortable with how we're proceeding. If there are no more questions or discussion, would someone like to make a motion of which there may be possibly 3? Ms. Scott.
I got it. So can I add the caveat of, for the purposes of the 1/12 budget?
Yes, I think that helps with clarification. If
For
it
the
helps, it
purposes
helps
of
everybody.
submitting the 1/12 budget to the DESE for June 1st, I move to approve the revised FY21 budget amount to be $41,449,432, which is a reduction of $285,191.
Okay, let's move. Second?
I would second that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to do a roll call. If you can turn your mics on, please. Terri,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Nancy,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Tina.
Aye.
Okay, and motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Scott. Now, motion number 2.
For the purposes of the 1/12 budget to be submitted to the DESE for June 1st, I move to revote the revised FY21 budget to a change in cost center 2000 labeled instruction expenses to an amount of $1,050,323. All other cost centers are the same as our last vote.
Is there
I
a
would
second?
that.
Okay. And I'm going to roll call. Terri,
A.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Joe,
Unhappily, yes.
Tina,
Aye.
and I. Motion carries. And motion 3, Ms. Scott.
For the purposes of submitting a 1/12 budget to the DESE for June 1st, I would like to move to approve the revised FY21 assessment by using an additional $793,332 of excess and deficiency E&D funds to support the school committee approved FY21 budget. Therefore, the total E&D funds to be used in the FY21 budget will be up to $1,666,141.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
Do I need to then go through the 2
Excuse me.
assessment amounts, or should that be a fourth motion?
Probably a 4th. Let's do it as a 4th. Okay. If everyone understands that. So the motion as read was seconded, and I'm going to do a roll call. Terri,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary,
Aye.
Nancy,
I'm sorry, Steve, aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
Tina,
Aye.
and I. Thank you. Motion carries. And for motion 4, Ms. Scott.
I move to approve for purposes of the 1/12 budget to the DESE on June 1st, the total assessment for FY '21 to be $34,924,398, which is a breakdown for Chatham of $8,693,761.50. And to Harwich, $26,230,636.50.
I would second that.
Second. Great. And a roll call. Terry,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
and I. And motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you for humoring me and trying to explain that all out because I was missing.
That was me last night. Don't forget. Sort of. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Is Katie still waving at us over there?
Oh,
Yeah.
yep.
And
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Joe, for you got my back. And I'm not kidding, I'm half kidding, but I just think we should be prepared after I have my noon time tomorrow with the DESE about this whole process and the 112. If something, we end up having an additional meeting or some kind of conversation based on what we learn tomorrow. I'm just giving a heads up.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. And now on to something a little bit happier. Graduation. Dr. Carpenter.
So graduation is still will be happening. So we will be having an 8 p.m. graduation ceremony on our stadium field June 23rd. And we will be starting some senior week events. So tomorrow will be our seniors' last day of class. And typically we have the last day of class, the seniors come pouring out of the school and there's a lot of honking of horns and the cars do a couple laps around the school. So tomorrow from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening, we've invited our seniors to decorate their cars and do a last lap around the school. So while they have been in distance learning to come back to the school for that. Starting next week, Principal Burkhead and Miss Police and Mr. Alamo will be heading out in the Sharkmobile. So they'll be going to each senior's home to deliver the cap and gown, take some photos, with everybody, and just try to get have that personal touch on getting the caps and gowns to the students, so that they'll have them in time for graduation, but also to have that that special delivery on June 2nd. There will be a Shark Athletic tribute for our senior student athletes at 8 p.m. And then there'll be on June 19th at 7 p.m. there'll be a senior arts night that will be happening via Google Meet heading into graduation. So we're glad to see this. The challenge is that that we have pretty strict social distancing guidelines that we need to go have in place for the graduation. I think as Principal Burkhead mentioned when we last met, we'll be following the same protocol that the Massachusetts State Police did for their graduation on Gillette Field that the governor presided over. So, so everybody will be spaced out, far apart on the field. It'll be just the seniors, broadcast live, into homes for families, for families and friends. We have a big sort of a portable jumbotron that will be showing up so that the seniors can see and hear the same feed that's going out to families, and then families will be able to go and see the seniors walk across the stage with their diplomas. But clearly, there's not going to be the superintendent and principal shaking 125 hands. So there'll be a lot of things that won't be as they have been in the past. But the really nice thing is that we'll be able to go and bring all of our seniors together and let them celebrate together one last time. And I think that was what we clearly heard from our seniors and the families in the survey that we gave them.
Great, thank you, Dr. Carpenter. All right. Oh, Tina.
I have a quick question, Dr. Carpenter, if you know the answer. The Sharkmobile, is it going to be a school bus, a van? Do you have any idea?
It's a school bus.
Okay.
Yep. So it's a school bus. We need to keep our administrators socially distanced, and the 3 administrators can spread out in the school bus pretty well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And all those caps and gowns. All right, great. Next item on the agenda would be recognitions. Oh, what? Ooh,
I had one question.
sorry, Sharon.
On the arts night and also the graduation itself, is there any way we would be able to see it, or is that going to be on the TV? Or
there will be a live link that the school committee will have, and that all of our school community and friends and family, regardless of where they'll be, so I think the nice thing is, I have relatives that I think would have wanted in different circumstances to travel to Cape Cod and see a graduation, and they'll be able to be at the graduation virtually, which is nice, and the school committee can also be there virtually as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Scott. And Sharon, moving on to recognitions.
Okay, in terms of recognitions, I would like to congratulate Nancy Gifford, one of our middle school science teachers. Nancy has earned the American Meteorological Society's certified AMS teacher designation, which is a professional recognition for completing required coursework and being actively engaged in raising earth science literacy for our students, and among science educators. This designation is much sought after, and it's quite a distinguished thing for her to get. We would like to thank David Oppenheim and the Wayside Inn for their latest donation of food for the Chatham Elementary School Pantry. The donation is for $5,282.98 worth of food that will allow them to serve approximately 300 people. And they were able to serve approximately 300 people in the last pickup week. And then finally, we also received a donation from Miss Fanning Smith and the Pine Acres Compass Realty Company for $1,500 for the Lighthouse Fund, and we're able to purchase an additional pantry and self-care items at Stop and Shop with those funds. So we'd like to recognize Mr. Farrell, the Stop and Shop manager, for his help with this, and for Stop and Shop's donation of 3 cases of snack chips for these efforts as well. So thank you all.
Great, thank you very much. Any subcommittee reports this evening? Seeing none. Superintendent's report. Oh, sorry, Tina. Subcommittee report?
Yeah, I just wanted to share on behalf of the policy subcommittee, we are going to be having a first reading of 2 policies, I believe, on the June 11th meeting. I think Melissa will probably reach out to you, Leah, to get that on the agenda. But just wanted to give everybody a heads up for June 11th.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. And Leah, you've got that for the agenda. Great, thank you. All right, superintendent's report.
So first, I'd like to just let the school committee know one of the things that that I've been wanting to do is to hold yet another conversation with parents. So it'll be another superintendent coffee, BYO coffee on a virtual meeting, but we'll hold that the evening of June 17th as we close out our distance learning for the year with students. We can get some feedback from parents on how it's going, and hopefully have some more information to provide parents and families on what things might look like in the fall. I have been involved in a lot of online meetings and have some scheduled in the upcoming week, just on what reopening might look like. And I know that there's going to be a big push in Massachusetts to get the schools reopened. But also, I think there's a lot of conversations going on how can we do that safely. So that's what will be coming, and will probably be a big piece of our conversations over the course of the next several school committee meetings.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Dr. Carpenter. Declaration of surplus. Do I have someone who would like to do the declaration of surplus? Mrs. Henderson is so good at it. Do you have it in front of you?
I do.
Oh, I'd love that. You can summarize it.
I can?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as
So
they're the same items.
Terri, you could have lied too. She would never have known.
I would like to move to
Approve.
approve the following to surplus. 37 laptops, 2 storage servers, 1 projector mounting arm, 1 Laserjet printer.
6.
Oh, sorry, 6 Laserjet printers. Thank you. 44 flat screen monitors, all from the Monomoy Regional Middle School, to be moved to surplus.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. All right, I'm going to do a roll call. Everyone, just turn your microphones on, please. No one's moved positions. That's fantastic. So Terri, you're up first, but you got to turn your mic off on.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joanne.
Yes.
Mary,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
and Tina.
Aye.
And I. Great. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. And presentation of warrants. All right. At this time, we asked if anyone in the public would like to speak tonight. We just ask you to limit it to 5 minutes. Anyone? Oh, hi, Charles. Absolutely. Just introduce yourself, please.
Charles Gruska, 6 T-Berry Ave, Harwich, Mass. It's a question. I was listening very, very intently to the whole discussion on the budget. My internet connection was failing me at parts, so I did not hear the motions or all of the motions that Ms. Scott had made. I heard the votes, but I'm wondering if you could please go over the 4 motions that were passed in slow motion, and perhaps if someone could just explain that in layman's terms, the impact of each of those motions that passed tonight. It might be a good practice for when you leave the meeting tonight and have to go out tomorrow and answer questions to others as to what's really happening with the budget at this time, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. That's a sticky one because we normally don't comment during public comments. But I'm going to defer to Ms. Scott as she made the motions, and
I think so. Hi, Charles.
Hi, Nancy.
The gist is that we voted a 1/12 budget. So the main motion to start with was to reduce the overall budget by the 285,000, which happened to be the same amount of the ELA curriculum that was in the budget. So that was motion one. Motion two was,
Changing cost center.
thank you. So the second motion was specifically where in the budget, which cost center that 285,000 came out of. Motion three was that we approved to use more, up to more, a certain amount of excess and deficiency in our budget. And then motion four was the actual assessments, which reflect using up to that amount of excess and deficiency.
So the situation as it stands now is basically you tried to maximize the amount of excess and deficiency that you would hold in reserve for the purposes of the state for June 1st. Am I correct in understanding that right now, where does the actual budget stand in relation to the budget that was passed earlier in the spring, the budget that's going to the towns? How has that been impacted from what was originally voted?
The budget as it stands is as we last voted it at our, not last meeting, the meeting before. And I don't know if you heard our discussion, but it is the budget that will be presented at the Chatham town meeting and is printed in the Chatham
Yes, I heard that.
town meetings. So that's as it stands there. And then Harwich is as it stood. And for now is as is until printed in their warrant for their town meeting, which is not until September.
And as I recall, that was a budget that now had the Harwich assessment at a 2% increase in terms of the increasing the assessment to Harwich,
1
2
point.
1 point.
or 1.99 or.
I had it somewhere. I just don't have it in
I
front of
see
me.
Katie nodding yes, 1.9.
Yes, she is. Okay, there it is. Okay. yeah.
Okay. And so, and thank you very much for clarifying that. And what's going through my mind in this whole discussion, it's a little different than, as I said last meeting, I've been through a number of 1/12 kind of budgets, but this is for a whole different set of purposes. So it sounds like
I think Charles froze. See, let's give him 1 second, see if he's able to come back.
Yeah, we're having really difficult internet stability here in Harwich. I've already been
dear.
kicked out once.
in
Uh-oh.
other words,
There he
words,
is.
which is probably going to be the Harwich figure.
So Charles, you cut out there for, I think, a minute. So
Oh, okay.
can you just briefly
I was just saying,
rewind?
I was thinking that what this sounds like is whatever budget will be voted June 28th, September 28th by the Harwich town meeting that assessment will become the actual budget projected out in an appropriate assessment to Chatham, but that will become the budget.
Correct.
Okay, because, and I'm thinking differently in a 2-town district versus the 5-town district that I worked in, where 4 out of 5 towns had to pass. So the other thing going through my mind is what the school committee and administration really has to struggle with now is we're going to start the school year on a 1/12 budget. The 1/12 budget might not even be an adequate budget that will pass on September 28th based on the Harwich situation. So the difficulty is to decide how are we going to begin the school year with is it going to be a best case scenario and fingers crossed that it will get passed at the Harwich town meeting, or are we going to be looking at cutting programs and cutting positions in the middle of the school year once the school year has begun? Because you're reserving enough money to have enough E&D to have the 1/12 budget. You know what you have to do under that scenario. It may become even a worst case scenario. So the thinking I guess that you have to be discussing and determining is opening this. What do we open the school year with? Are we going to make the cuts before we open and live with them no matter what, or are we going to say we're going to go for a best case scenario or what we think is educationally sound, and then possibly have to make program reductions and eliminations partway through the school year? If you're
Yes.
following what I'm thinking out loud.
So Charles, if you take the two budget conversations, the conversation we had last meeting and tonight's into combine the two of them, we know that in order to come in and support where Harwich's shortfall is, that we're going to have to reduce some of the things we wanted. We wanted an ELA curriculum. We know we're not, that's going to be one bridge too far for this fiscal year. There's some capital projects that we wanted to do. We sort of know that we're going to not be able to do those more than likely, and that there's a set of staff that I think we're going to have to reduce. So we tried to proactively, sort of hold out the olive branch to Harwich and say, here's an amount of staffing and some reductions that I think we're going to need to put in place to help you get to where you need to get to, not knowing what that number is yet. And we're still, we're still waiting to hear what that number is. The hope is that some combination of that reduction, potentially a little bit more excess and deficiency, and working with our two towns will get us to some number that's workable for both towns. And, without hurting the educational program that we've worked so hard for the last 7 years to put in place. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we have to work with the towns to just try to land the plane in using some combination of all of that. And this 1/12 budget, by having at least forecasting that we may use more excess and deficiency, gives us more options, and leaves the option of more excess and deficiency open. But we know we can't, there's only so much you can use before you just kick the can down the road to FY22, and we don't want to do that either.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. It's just such difficult because we don't even have a state budget anywhere near yet with our chapter 70 figures. It's just it's shooting in the dark in so many ways and hoping for the best, and I wish you well, all of you.
This is the craziest budget situation I've ever had to manage in 20 years as an administrator.
Well, I was in a district that started the school year several years in a row on a 1/12 budget, and this is the totally different. And I echo just exactly what you said in the experiences that I've had. I've never seen anything like it, and how anyone can actually plan when we're going to have kids in a classroom opening day of school, and need to know what kind of program we're going to have in place for them. So, wish you well, all of you.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Joanne.
No, I was waving bye to Charles.
Oh, everyone stop waving. You're confusing me. All right. Do we have Cindy? Are you waving or are you raising? Okay. You gotta unmute.
Cindy Gashi.
Yeah. Oh, nope. Unmute.
Okay.
Go.
I'm Cindy Gashi. I live in Howard Fort. I also work for the district. And one point that I want to make is we're talking about making further cuts, but at the Board of Selectmen's meeting last night or yesterday afternoon, they're looking at going forward with no cuts to any of the town departments. So I think that we need to look at that and see if they have any flexibility, because I know that Dr. Carpenter said he's going to meet with them next week. And Dr. Carpenter, can you give me an approximate number of staff you think will be cut going forward with the proposed budget?
All I can say is at present, we have looked at roughly 13.5 FTEs, notified them all already that, and my hope is that is the worst case scenario. In a best case scenario, I would hope that we can, land the plane and preserve some of those positions. But yeah, as I mentioned at our last meeting, I ethically don't want to have people thinking they have a job when at the moment I don't see that in the tea leaves. And I also think that you're right. When we're working with the town of Harwich, we want to make sure that the reduction in staffing is equitable across all town departments, including the schools as a big piece of the town.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because that's a question and that's a line of conversation that's now going on in the town, because some people in the public didn't realize that you had already proposed budget cuts and program cuts. So I think that that's something we need to make sure that the town of Harwich knows, that as a school district, we have made an effort to lower the budget by cutting staff.
Right, and people have to understand in school budgets, if our share is to cut roughly $2 million out, or to address roughly $2 million of a shortfall in Harwich, school budgets are primarily people. It's the teaching supplies are a very small piece of what the overall operating budget of a school district is. So you can't reduce. There's no conceivable way that you're going to reduce hundreds of thousands of dollars without touching staff. And as you touch more staff, ultimately you end up impacting programs. And we want to make sure that we've built a really strong school district. We don't want to be in a situation where where families are now not seeing Monomoy as a strong school district that they want to send their kids to. We were there when we started. We've come such a long ways, and we want to make sure that we keep this the place that families in Chatham and Harwich want to send their kids.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. All right, great. I'm not seeing anyone else for public comment. So at this time, I would like a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay. I think it was Nancy. I heard a second with Mary.
Good enough.
Okay, and I'm going to roll call. Terri,
Yes.
Joanne,
Yes.
Mary,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
Sharon,
Aye.
and Tina.
Aye.
And I. Meeting adjourned, 8 p.m.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye,
Don't
everybody.
forget to pass in
Good
your
night.
evaluations.
Good night.
Yes.
Good
Stay
night.
healthy, everyone.
Sharkmobile. Bye.
You too.